listen to at their own convenience. I've just started the record on. We are touching 6, so I think we will just start now. Um, Welcome and good evening, everyone. Pune is getting hotter. It's no longer the same weather that we used to have. Things are changing for sure. Um, with this, from an IMCI point of view, for those of you who are not very familiar, it's a body which works on the management and development of consultants, so to say. It's a global body which looks at how we can improve the standards of consulting globally. We have almost about 60 odd countries who are part of this body, and if there's an important certification program that it runs also in terms of evaluating or looking at the benchmarking of consulting practice, which is the certified management consultants. And at many RFPs, which comes out eventually, not so much in India, but at least elsewhere, you would see that as one of the criteria for an entry. Uh, okay.
I think Ranga,
Can
it's taken care of. Yeah.
Much better, yeah. That said, we will just, I think, this week, in fact, the start of this week brought some bad news to us. One of our fellow pro, Shri Sharu Rangnekar,
Ranga.
uh, he was also one of the national past president for us at IMCI. He himself, I think, from a management concepts point of view, to if you some of us got the privilege of listening to him, was amazing, because he could join different concepts together and give you something which you would say, wow. And at the same time, he had a lot of books that he published on varied subject. It was not just about consulting. It was various things which you could read from him. uh, so I will request, we'll just keep a minute's silence for his soul, starting now. Thank you very much.
And Chandan, if you allow me to add, I would like to say a few words about Sharu because he was my professor.
Sure.
He taught us on the campus, and not just as a very leading light for us students who came to this new profession. He's positioned him, and David, this is primarily for your benefit also. Many of us considered him the Drucker of India because he did his writings, he was prolific in his writings, as well as also created a series of videos. And those are the days when audio and video was very important, and he used to create a series of videos based on his book as well as. And so he was a prolific, not just as he was a amazing thinker, and also, of course, he had an outstanding industrial career before he joined the consulting ranks. So we all remember him extremely, not just fondly, because I think with a lot of respect. I thought I must add that because Sharu was an outstanding man. And I think personally, I feel very lucky that I was one of his students, and we gained a lot from him.
Thank you very much for that, Jay. I think Om Shanti and more power to his family. Let's just pray. Okay, so we delve in to today's topic then, which essentially is about innovation, because for the last series of talks that we have had, uh, one thing which I think is extremely critical to all of us is how do we try to make the most of whatever we have, whatever time it is. I mean, today it may look more relevant, but I'm sure across our lifetimes in the past, present, and future, will come across that. And it was around 2014 or 15, if I recollect. I had the pleasure of listening to Professor David. He was David then; he was not a professor at that point. And the start to end, I think it was so captivating. 1 hour just flew, and some of the things that he said, I mean, it stays with you because it's extremely relevant in that aspect. So I requested him, reached out, and he was kind enough to oblige on that front. His profile and about him, I think again a prolific career that he has had, as yet, including being extremely well uh, connected with some of the top corporates across the globe, as well as his current stint with the education and with the students. I'm sure he's still connected with a lot of coaching or a lot of workshops that he takes for the corporates. I'll keep it open to you, Professor David, to take it up. You can just maybe start with probably setting up the context of the talk, and it's all yours. A couple of things, a request to all of you, please be on mute. With this limited audience, we'll always get a chance to ask questions in between, and if Professor David allows, if it can be done between session or whatever way he is comfortable, we can do all the Q&A at the end of it. uh, you can post your questions on the chat. That's the best way for us to, let's say, connect and then coordinate on this.
Well, thank you, Chandan. With regard to questions, please interrupt at any time. I'll be happy to hear your voice, happy to read your comments or questions in chat. I believe in interaction. You know, I am always been a compulsive teacher, but that's not how I earned my living. I earned my living most of my career in management consulting. And nevertheless, I have a lot of love for education. And one of my goals, I've been working even before I joined ISME full time, which is a business school in Mumbai. Even before I joined full time, I was working to improve Indian higher education. One of my goals was to eliminate one word from our education system. And that word I wanted to eliminate was lectures. You see, even after I joined the university, they'd say, "Oh, sir, you have a lecture on Tuesday morning." I said, "No, I don't." "But sir, you're teaching strategic management the second year, or you're teaching copywriting to PD. So your lecture is on Tuesday morning." I said, "No, it's not. I don't have any lectures. I don't lecture. My contention is no one learned anything by listening to a lecture. We learn by doing." So I unfortunately didn't bring a lot of exercises for you today. Normally I would do so. I would expect that because you're my fellow consultants, you are able to actually get something out of a talk. Most people are not. They forget everything that was said. But as Chandan so kindly noted, he actually remembered some things because of probably the way I teach and the fact that I like to give something of value. But you're more than welcome, everyone. It's a small group, so we can keep it pretty informal. Love to dialogue with you. Please feel free to interrupt anytime with a question or even a comment. All right, so what we're going to do now is get into my PowerPoint. And this is me. Any questions?
Yes, one. Tell us about the songwriting career that you had, or if it was a career of. That's
Well,
that's a little unique amongst us consultants. So
yeah, it's a little bit different. Well, I've had at least 5 careers, so my career path makes no sense to anyone. But at one point, I thought I wanted to be in the music business, and I tried songwriting. Didn't get too far with it, but I also got into talent management. I found a fellow who was down on his luck. He'd been in Hollywood. He'd done on some nationwide tours. He was actually, his piano playing was actually featured on a couple of very big hit records in the US. But he was down on his luck, and I helped him to restore his career. So I think more as a favor to me than anything else, he put 2 of my songs on his record.
Hmm.
And so I'm
And
actually
who?
published, but oh, he never became famous. He was a religious music guy, a gospel music guy, and in the Christian concert circuit. But yeah, so he put 2 of my songs on his album. So I am officially a published songwriter. I could tell you more stories, but this is not the time for it.
Right.
Any other
Thanks.
questions? Okay. So yeah, this is what we're going to talk about today. The topic is creating a culture of innovation. And I'm going to share with you some of what I've been teaching in workshops for the past 15 years to companies such as RIL, Tata Aditya Birla, SAIL, Marico, Cognizant, Nestle. These are the companies I've worked with that you've worked with as well. And this is what they pay me for, to teach them how to create a culture of innovation. So since you're my fellow consultants, and since I'm now in the education sector, I can give it away without getting paid. Isn't that sweet? So this is this is what I would normally teach them as managers. Now I have a separate set of workshops where I actually teach people to do the skill of innovation, but that's not the focus today. We could do that at a different time. Today is, as a manager, how do you make your organization innovate? So let's go right to that first lever. What are the policies we need as managers that are going to make our organization innovate? It starts at the top. Please just read these 4 points. That's another one of my teaching rules. Never, 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 never read your slides to your audience. If somebody has a vision problem, tell me, and I'll read them to you. But I think you all have 2 perfectly good eyes you can read. So creating a culture of innovation starts right at the top of the organization. The chairman and managing director has to be sold out for innovation. And one of my biggest frustrations in my consulting work was they paid a lot of lip service to innovation. There was a fair degree of eyewash. But when it actually came down to making that commitment, I didn't find the same dedication. Maybe you've experienced that in your consulting career as well, but I certainly experienced it. And I felt so bad because innovation actually can bring huge results if an organization is willing to invest, and just making it a buzzword doesn't really do what it needs. So this is a good quote from a previous CEO of Barclays before they ran into all their difficulties. But take a moment and read it, and then I would like to open the floor and ask for your reactions. Let's make this interactive. Any reactions to this quote from Anthony Jenkins?
Yeah, I mean, they all say the right stuff, don't they?
And I think you've hit the nail. It's basically a lot of lip service which goes around the word innovation, because that's almost a cliche that you get to hear everywhere without actually being open to that, because innovation also means a lot of times not the ROIs or the results that you're looking at, because it may work in your favor, it may not. I mean, it's in a way it's also like a research that you're doing.
Innovation, you mean?
Yes.
Well, the difference is, Chandan, some people do it wrong and some people do it right.
Yeah.
If you do it right, it's not going to cost, it's going to pay. The problem is, again, because they want to promote innovation, and what they get is traditional innovation, which is extremely hit or miss. Modern innovation, skilled innovation, scientific innovation, not innovation in science, but scientifically managed innovation, actually has a tremendous track record. So it's really a shame that they think talking about it is enough, and they think just starting any WIT program is enough. It's not. Get a consultant to teach you the right way, the professional way to innovate. And a term you probably heard is called design thinking. What I used to present as innovation, a 3-step process, I've now repackaged according to some global standards, and now I call it design thinking, a 5-step process. But it's it's the same thing, but it's just sliced and diced a little bit differently. It's amazingly effective. But again, that's a focus for another day. So I think I'm getting some agreement on this. It really is more than saying what you say, it's how you behave. So this is what CEO's main job is. Small companies, the CEO is the innovator in chief. But once the organization grows, it's almost never the CEO's job to be the innovator. Steve Jobs is an exception. He was amazing. But most companies, the CEO's job is not to be the innovator in chief. In fact, as we'll discuss later, a lot of organizations now have chief innovation officers. And I've done some workshops for them. So let me ask you what you think. Where do the obstacles lie in organizations? Obstacles to innovation. Where do you find them? What kind of obstacles are they? That's a better question. What sort of obstacles keep a company from being innovative, in your judgment? You've all worked with great corporations. What are your ideas?
Yeah, David, this is Ranga. I would like to add something to what you said about policy. And I think, see, I actually work with, or I'm exposed to a lot of the tech companies, the ones with work with artificial intelligence and robotics and all that. And there, the policy for the artificial intelligence machine or a robot is created in a different manner. And one of the challenges we have in artificial intelligence is in artificial general intelligence, where we try to make the tool work with, a lot of learn by itself. I mean, use a robot to learn by itself. Okay? And so I thought that it's much more challenging to build policies for human beings than build it for the machines. Okay. And
All right.
unfortunately, what's happening is for generations or for centuries, we have been dealing with humans who are the toughest people to manage, and creating policies for in scale, for a large number of people, it's very tough.
Okay.
I don't think it's been right at this point. I think it is more hit and run and trial by fire, and there are no algorithms for people to use. And you create something, you go into a roadblock, and then you retract.
Okay.
So take the
So
example
let me just stop you, sir. If I can just stop you for a second, we really want to focus on today's topic. Okay, obstacles to innovation. What kind of obstacles exist? Sunil Abrol has given us a brilliant comment. He says one of the issues is there's a lack of ownership for innovation, and we will address that spot on in the third lever. Who should own innovation? Fantastic. Suresh, you have something to add? Okay, I see you've just come on. Okay.
I have something to add. It's basically
please, Chokidar.
Yes,
please,
yes,
our friend,
yes.
the Chokidar.
Yes, you are right. I'm Chokidar. So, one is the organizational culture. The culture is not there for innovation. Second is the immediate short-term goals for the targets, etc. Then cultural goals for a hit. And then firefighting comes many times that we are firefighting and you say innovation, the people who are working on innovation policies, extra money, etc. goes to firefighting. Many times there is no money. And another thing is legal hurdles. There are a lot of legal hurdles. People do innovation for what? So that they can get the benefit after few years. But if there is no motivation for that, people don't go for innovation. That is what my take is, 4-5 points.
Wow. Okay. So we heard several things there. It's not a high enough priority. There's no money for it. There are legal questions. Yeah, and it's the short-termism of many corporations is an obstacle to innovation. Quite right, sir.
If
Thank
I
you for
can
sharing
also
that.
just add maybe fear of failure.
Wow, fear of failure. That's a fantastic observation, Chanda. So
Excellent.
where does that lie in the organization? Okay, I think what you'll really like what we show you on this screen. So I'm going to go forward, but beautiful comment, Chanda. Okay, the first type is this one. Fear of failure is an attitude. So you nailed it. That is the greatest obstacle. If there's a reason why innovation doesn't happen and there's no culture of innovation, probably the greatest issue you need to deal with is attitudinal. And that's why the CEO is so important, because the CEO really is the leader, sets the tone and sets the culture. Now there are other obstacles as well, but number one is an attitude problem. The second one is institutional, and that's what Chokidar, sir, or whoever says, Sunil said it. No one owns innovation. I own my product line. I own the finances of the company. I own the marketing. I own HR. Nobody owns innovation. And so it doesn't get the attention. You know, it's an institutional. The way the institution is set up does not support innovation. So this is what you're going to find if you do consulting work as I do with large organizations, or really any organizations. If innovation is not happening, it's one of these two problems. And we could point to countless examples, but I think you know that. So when we talk about our three levers, policies, programs, and structures, they're designed to overcome attitudinal barriers and institutional barriers. So one of the ways you get the attitude right is to make sure that it's not just talk, there's actually some reward for innovation. You know the old saying, reward what you want to reinforce. Reward what you want to reinforce. And there are lots of different types of rewards for innovation that we've seen in successful companies. Out of the three categories, which one do you have a question about? Which one is not clear? You might not know my terminology. So do you know what a psychic reward is, an organizational reward, or a monetary? I think is pretty obvious, right? Show me the money. That's the famous quote from the movie Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. Yeah, money can always be given. But what are those other two? Anyone?
Well, psychic is maybe more in terms of how you. I mean, those are the non-verbals, which is how you self-assure someone, or where people feel that yes, you are supported, or your work is appreciated.
Psychic is
Okay, good.
basically attitudinal reward that you get. You are motivated to do it, and internal reward. And organization is that you are going up in the organization. Your work is recognized. People believe you. People say that you have done something good. That is organization reward. So that organization gives
Precisely.
motivation.
Precisely. That is exactly right. Psychic rewards are things that make you feel good inside. Okay, they may not have any monetary value. Look at the example. You get a nice certificate signed by President George Bush to honor you for your achievement, or you get a medal, or you get to have an award from the CEO, or something like that, or even just a nice token little present or a plaque. Those are things that don't have a lot of monetary value, but they make you feel good. They're things like recognition, acknowledgement. If the CEO is recognizing and acknowledging people all the time for innovation, guess what's going to happen in your company? You're going to get more innovation. And organizational rewards, just as Dr. Rakesh was telling us, Dr. Goyal, he said, you get a promotion. You get a new title after your name. Okay? You get employee of the month, whatever the heck that is. You get organizational rewards. And that people are motivated by those. And then there are monetary rewards. We don't sneeze at monetary rewards. We don't call them useless. They do work, but you often find that you don't have to spend a lot on monetary rewards. You can actually get a lot of distance. You can get a lot of results with psychic rewards. People care a lot about those things. Self-esteem, esteem of their peers, acknowledgement of their efforts. So when you're the CEO trying to build a culture of innovation, look at your policies with regard to rewarding innovation. If you're rewarding a whole bunch of other things, you're probably not going to get innovation. So there has to be a reward, okay? So what is the right way to recognize and reward innovation? Okay. Let's look at an example from 200 years ago. You all know that fellow, the Emperor of France, crowned himself, and he took over most of Europe. But he had a challenge. He was fighting as far away as Russia, all the way across Europe, and he took a terrible beating there because they didn't account for the weather. But his bigger challenge was logistics. You know what they had a hard time getting when they were 1,000 miles or 1,500 kilometers or 2,000 kilometers from home? Does anybody know what does an army march on? Do you know what an army marches on? Do you know the the end of that saying? Anyone?
Stomach.
If not, yes. Thank you, Jay Shankar. Yes, an army marches on its stomach. That's an old saying. It says, what? We're not gastropods. We're not snails. We don't march on our stomach. Anyway, it means that you have to be able to feed and provision your army no matter where it is. Well, in the early 1800s, when Napoleon was fighting his battle, there was no way to transport food across 2,000 kilometers. There was simply no way to do it. All right? There were only a very few foods that could be done. So Napoleon actually offered a reward to anyone who could solve that. And he had a second reward. He had a second reward. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to tell you that other one about food later. I'm getting a little confused. This was an indication where an issue when he actually had to find a way to make it easier to move his artillery. I'm going to go back to the food story later. My bad. And welcome to Dr. Pradeep Desai, and welcome to Dr. Manohar Tikana, okay, from Bangalore. So we have somebody from Ahmedabad and Bangalore. Welcome. So actually the other one was he had to move his equipment, and they didn't have automobiles. They didn't have self-propelled vehicles. They had balloons. That's all they had. But everything was pulled by a horse or dragged by men. So he needed a lighter way to manufacture these weapons. And he offered a massive prize to anyone who could do it. And because he offered a lot of money, the scientists in France went to work, the metallurgists went to work, and you know what they came up with? Aluminium. That's where aluminium was really made. It was as a result of an innovation reward. He offered a reward, and he did some incredible amount. I don't remember the numbers, but it was like a lifetime's fortune. He made that man extremely rich, but it benefited his entire war effort. So it's just an example that says, yes, if you reward innovation and you recognize it, you will get it. It should be pretty obvious. Reward what you want to reinforce. Now, then there's this other question, okay? If I want to motivate innovation, can I make it people's part-time job, or does it have to be a full-time job? So what they've done in 3M, and I think most of you know the story, is they've said if you work at research and development in 3M, and your job is to help find new solutions and innovate, you spend 4 days out of 5 working on your boss's projects. The boss has you working on a new Scotch tape or a new disc or a new medical, whatever it is, bandage. And you work on that project for 4 days. But on the last day of your 5-day work week in US, you work on what you wish to work on. You choose your project. Now it has to get some approval. But your time is not your boss's on that 5th day. Your time is your own, and you work on your own project. And that's how we got Post-it notes. You all know the story. This one guy was working on glues, and he found a glue that doesn't hold very well, and he found a use for it, a removable stick. So one of the things the CEO can do is make it people's part-time job, saying, okay, you have your regular job, but we want you to be a part-time innovator as well. Because that gets people motivated to do it on their own. That really sets a tone that says innovation is valuable. Our policy is 20% of your time work on innovation. 80% work on your boss's project. 20% work on your. That's a policy that shows a commitment to innovation and develops a culture of innovation. Now, when you do that, I mean, I joke with my Indian clients. I said, can you imagine any boss willingly hiring a subordinate to not work on the boss's project? Can you imagine the boss wanting to pay you not to work on her project? It's the silliest thing we can ever imagine, because it's widely understood and accepted here in our country of India that you do what your boss tells you. Your time is your boss's. So there will be losses. If you bring this into a corporation and you tell the managers, okay, you have to give your employees 20% time off, or maybe it's a 6-day week, you give them 16% time off 1 day out of 6 to work on their own, you're going to get resistance. And you will lose certain things. You will lose full control over that employee. You will lose because now your priorities do not become the only priorities. That employee's project becomes a priority ahead of yours 1 day a week. That's not acceptable to a lot of managers. Obviously, you mentioned in the discussion earlier, when you undertake a new project, there's always a risk of failure. And some managers are simply not willing to accept that risk. They said, look, I know if I have him work on my important tasks of the day, I know I'll have success. The work will get done. The product will get manufactured. The sales will be booked. The records will be kept. So why not just let me keep this employee doing the things that are sure to succeed? So the CEO has to have the opinion that innovation is worth the risk. That's an attitudinal as well as institutional. And of course, if we have to finance that employee to work on his project, there's going to be some expense involved. But what do you get in return if you accept those risks? Okay? All of a sudden, people are so engaged in their work because they're working on something they specifically care about. It's my project. You want employee engagement? That'll do it instantly. People become more productive. We tend to work harder when we're interested. Furthermore, if anybody is feeling stymied or blocked, my boss doesn't let me innovate. My boss doesn't want any new solutions. You give that person 1 day out of 6. All of a sudden, the full creativity of the innovation will come out without barriers. And the idea for the company, as it has worked quite well for 3M over the years, and Google and other companies that do this, you will get occasionally huge multi-billion-dollar solutions. Doesn't happen every day. We don't expect it to happen every day. But if we can make in the innovation everybody's job, at least part-time, or certain departments, maybe you only do that for R&D, or you only do that for new product development. But if your CEO has this attitude and is willing to put his skin in the game, this is the payoff. Okay, so any questions or comments about the idea of having corporate policies, specifically reward policies, but any other kind of policies that show the organization this innovation is really important to us? Any comments, feedback, or questions on that first lever before we move to the next? Okay, great. Let's continue. So the second thing you do, aside of having general policies that apply all the time, you have specific programs that either may run continuously or may run for a limited time. So one of the ones that you use is called an innovation challenge. And this has happened, this is kind of like what Napoleon did. He said, who can give us, a better way to move around a lighter material that's not so hard to move across the battlefield? And somebody came up with aluminum. So the other thing is, for instance, just any kind of competition like that. You may not know the story. There was a great World's Fair, a world exposition in the city of Paris, France in 1889. The whole world was invited to come and see the wonders. Every country sent its best products and representatives, and they all had a huge exposition. To honor that exposition, they built a centerpiece. Does anybody know what it was, the centerpiece of that exhibition? It was the tallest building in the world, the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, that was built to be the centerpiece, the tourist attraction. Okay, wow, fantastic question from Sunil. How do you measure the ROI on the time that you give? I can actually tell you that. But I think we should have that discussion offline, I think, rather than take it up in this session. Let's talk about these levers. Because your policy, you have to have the view that it is going to pay off. But how you actually make that case with rupees and paise, that you have to, I'll show you a little bit later. Okay, but let's go back to the story. So in 1889, this amazing landmark, still with us, the most recognized landmark in the world, believe it or not, is still with us 150 years later, 140 years later, 130 years later. So 4 years later, 3 to 4 years later, the city of Chicago, US, was going to have its World's Fair, its exposition. And it was celebrating 400 years since Columbus sailed to the New World. And so they said, what can we have as the centerpiece of our festival? The French had the Eiffel Tower. So they solicited suggestions, and you know what kind of suggestions came in? Copycat suggestions. I'll build you a wider tower. I'll build you a different shaped tower. Eiffel himself said, I will come and I will build you taller tower. And they said, no, thank you. We want American solution, not French solution. So they said a polite no to him. And so, okay. So the innovation didn't happen because people were not thinking innovatively. But because the challenge had gone out, come up with something new, and all these suggestions were solicited, one guy got a fresh idea. He was actually in Chicago, and he was attending a meeting, sitting at a table with others, a breakfast meeting or a lunch meeting or something. And he just got an idea and he quickly sketched it out. That idea was eventually accepted. It did become the centerpiece of the Columbian Exposition. It was a true innovation. And although that particular one had only lasted for 40 years, the invention is still with us 127 years, 128 years later. And at the exposition itself, it became the best moneymaker. Just as the Eiffel Tower, you had to pay to go up in the lift, and it was a big moneymaker. This innovation so captivated the exhibition public that it was a bestseller, right? And so what the fellow did is he thought of train bogies, train cars, and then he thought of a wheel, and he put train bogies on a wheel. And instead of building a tower, he still fulfilled people's ability to go and up and look in the sky and look at the Chicago skyline. But instead of climbing up a straight tower, he had to revolve on a wheel. Those cars are actually full-size railroad bogies. This thing was huge. And by the way, can you guess the man's name? It was Ferris, George Ferris. So they named the Ferris wheel after him. Now, I'm only saying this because the idea is you can have a program in any company, of issuing a challenge. Hey, we're looking for a new AI application. We're looking for a new application for robotics. And you will get people just by issuing the challenge, will get them to innovate. I worked with Siemens a few times. And if you offer a contest, Siemens has Inventor of the Year. It was a big thing back about 14 years ago, 15 years ago, when an Indian won Siemens Inventor of the Year. And he was working elsewhere, but he was supported by the team in, I think it was either Chennai or Bangalore at the time. Can't remember after all these years. But yeah, they were thrilled that one of the Indians had won Innovator of the Year. It was a huge honor. So you get people into a contest, they'll compete to come up with the best solutions. I call these strategic innovation initiatives. This is new, different from the contests. Another way to name them that might be easier for you is just innovation project. Innovation project. I worked at the innovation lab at Pitney Bowes, a large American corporation. And every couple of years, we would bring in a consultant. The CEO would issue his own challenge, which is like an innovation challenge. But in addition to just leaving it open as an open challenge, which is what Napoleon did, he would actually put teams to work on it. That's the difference. It actually became an active innovation project. For instance, the one I remember best is the project he assigned us, and I was working in the innovation lab, so we got assigned to do the project. The challenge was this: what can we invent that is going to be so essential to their industry, not our industry? I'll tell you in a second. Not inventing for our own industry of franking machines and managing the post, but what can we invent that is going to be so essential for their industry that the courier and parcel delivery companies will need our technology? What technology can we invent and own that every parcel and courier company will need it in 5 years? You see the strategy involved? It wasn't give us a new franking machine or addressing machine or sorting machine, anything like that. That was our regular business. We had engineering doing that. But this was strategic innovation. What's going to position our company well for the future? So as you can see, that kind of innovation has these dimensions. This focus was 5 years. We're innovating today for something 5 years. Sunil, you asked about return on investment. That's a crapshoot. That's a crapshoot. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 5 years. Am I right? So you as a CEO have to be confident that it's going to pay off. And the answer is it always does. It always does. We as a team in the Innovation Lab set the record that year. They had other of these strategic innovation projects or initiatives, but we set the record. We came up with 400 invention ideas. Out of those 400, 70 were selected for further exploration. I don't know how many actually got launched or implemented, but 70 new potential solutions out of 400 ideas. Furthermore, 35 patents were filed. That was an interesting project, but it was intentional. So as a program, you can just run a project every so often. You can issue a challenge so often. You can have a contest every so often. You know about Kaizen, and they used this at Vizag Steel, where I did some consulting. And I think they had about 18 crores of documented profit improvement from just having these quality circles. And Mirza, is that a question for you with your thumb? You want to ask something, or you're just testing out the camera? Okay, Pradeep Desai is asking, what about unexpected? Well, unexpected is unprofessional. I have to say that. We love it. We feel great when it happens, right? Unexpected, okay? All right, chance discovery. We love it when it happens. But there's an old saying, Dr. Desai, hope is not a strategy. I said earlier, that's the difference between innovation the traditional way and innovation done with scientific management in the design thinking 5-step process. You see, most companies have always said, well, we hope somebody will get an idea. Please give us an idea. Give us an idea, please. Okay. And sometimes it works because people do have good ideas, but most of the time it doesn't. Let me share with you another statistic. Out of all the US patents measured as of sometime about 30 years ago, 1 in 500, that is 0.2%, 1 in 500 actually made money. Would you like to play a game with those odds? 499 out of 500, you're going to lose. One time you'll make money. Would you like to play that game? Every one of those patents was an innovation. You can't get a patent unless you've done something that's innovative. And yet innovative wasn't enough. Most of them, almost all of them did not make money. So just hoping for a chance discovery is not a strategy. Take it when it comes. Hire inventive, innovative people. Expect them to come up with discoveries. But you're much better off giving them tools and a process and an environment to make innovation happen. Then it will happen regularly. Okay? And somebody's made the comment, Dr. Goyal has said, yeah, he said it's almost like venture capital. Venture capital invests in 10 companies, expect 7 to fail, 2 to break even, and 1 to make money. Okay? So it's the same thing. You're willing to accept failure. Many business people can't tolerate failure. Everything has to work. They only end up doing what's safe. They only copy. Mukesh Ambani was like that. He changed. That's the year I got invited to work with RIL, 2008. He brought in Dr. Mashelkar to be his advisor and to sit on the board of Reliance. And Dr. Mashelkar said, Mukesh, you can do innovation here. So I was one of the people they brought in to help set it up. Okay, so yeah, thanks for that question and that comment, gentlemen. Thank you so much. But yeah, you see the point. Having a quality circle, if you give people that structure, you give people that program, every week you're going to meet and recommend improvements. It will happen. The figure I wanted to give you that is in Japan, they get about 100 ideas per employee per year. That sound impossible? You know, at Vizag, they got maybe 2 or 3 and they were happy. An average employee would give 2 or 3 improvement ideas in a year's time. And they had 17 crores of documented savings just from that limited input. What if they could bring everybody up to Japanese levels? And everyone in the company was giving 100 ideas a year, 1 every 3 days. Okay, so this is just another program, putting in quality circles. Watch out. You have to have the understanding about how they work. What about a simple suggestion scheme? And I love this because this was taught to me by my adopted Indian dad, Sri S.C. Gupta, who was an executive, a manager, a senior manager at Indian Telephones Industry. Okay, and he said that one time there was a fellow manager who was running his own plant in ITI. Most of you I noticed are old enough like me to remember when ITI was a thing. The younger generation will never have heard of it. It's not there anymore, right? Okay, but he was worried about the labor situation at his plant. Labor relations wasn't always an issue. So he started a suggestion scheme. He announced to all of his workers, he says, we want your suggestions, any suggestions. He says, you just drop it into the suggestion box, put your name on it, and we will give you 2 rupees. And this was back, what, 35, 45 years ago when 2 rupees was significant. You can't do much with 2 rupees today, but that was 2 rupees in the old economy. Now, what do you think his peers, his fellow ITI managers thought of that? Well, the answer is they thought he'd gone mad. They thought he'd absolutely lost his mind. How can you give 2 rupees for any suggestion? He says, you know what you'll get? You'll get nonsense. You'll get, hey, we want dal makhani instead of dal tadka. in the canteen. Or you'll get, oh, look into so-and-so, he's corrupt, he's not doing his job. You'll get all sorts of terrible, you'll bust your budget. You'll completely ruin it if you do a suggestion scheme and you offer. Okay, so they said, you're nuts, you've lost your mind. He says, wait a minute. He says, look, my main concern is employee relations, labor relations. So he says, if my employees are unhappy about something, I would much rather have them putting it on a piece of paper in a box than putting their paper into a paper mache model of me, an effigy of me, and then burning that in the party. I'd much rather have them put their energy into making suggestions than complaining. And secondly, even if I get 10,000 rupee and I have to pay 20,000 rupees, if I get one good idea, I'll more than pay for the whole thing. So that's just echoing what Dr. Goyal was saying, that, yeah, a small number of hits can really make it work. So these are just some programs, innovation projects, innovation contests, innovation challenges, suggestion schemes. These are some of the specific policies that companies use. Rupees, okay. All right, you can put in a knowledge management system. Time is running away, so I'm not going to stop on this. Sometimes this can bring out innovation. Now I want to move to, okay, any other comments or questions before we move to the final lever? So we've talked about, again, the culture of the company, meaning through the policies that we actually do reward and put resources into innovation. And then again, the programs, we actually run innovation programs. Any questions or comments about those two? Okay, the third one is putting the right structure in place. And by that, I mean organizational structure. When you look at your table of organization, and I actually teach my students, that's the British term. The American term, because Americans like shortened names, is the org chart, organizational chart, org chart. And then I even teach them another one that comes from France. And I kind of like this one the best of all. It's one word. They call it the organogram. Organogram. And all that is the boxes and lines. That's the chart of the organization. So the table of organization. So what I mean here by structure is exactly that. What departments are there? What job functions are going to do innovation? Or where does innovation sit in the organization? Whose job is it? Earlier, Mr. Abrol said, nobody's responsible for it. Exactly. That is an organization that doesn't have a culture of innovation. Innovation has to sit somewhere. And so the usual places where you find it are these four. And I don't think I need to spend time on these, except to say that marketing, you always need innovation. You have to do something new in marketing every day. It's more, I think it's probably the most innovative job in the company. Operations, you're always looking for improvement, cost savings, productivity improvement. R&D, obviously, you're always researching better things. NPD, you're always trying to make the new product better than the old. So these are logical places for innovation to sit in your organization, but they're not the only ones. Okay, what about putting it everywhere? Is that practical? Is that not practical? Okay, we're not going to answer that today, but as consultants, I'm sure you'll give it some reflection. And innovation be everywhere in your organization. What about beyond the boundaries of your organization? The great example of this is Procter & Gamble. I'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute, but you can read the books by A.G. Lafley and the others about how they did it. But your company has some very good minds, but I promise you one thing, they don't have all the good minds in the world. So you can look to the people who sell things to you, and they may have better designs. They may design a better automotive component. They may design a better module for your software. or a better component assembly for your robot or whatever it is. You can look to your customers and they'll give you both new unexpected requirements that you don't know about, but they'll also take your product and adapt it. They'll find new uses for it. I could tell you some funny stories. I will tell you one because it's just hilarious. One of the feminine hygiene vendors, okay, feminine hygiene products here in India, noticed that there was a surge in sales of their products in South India. And they had no idea why. They said there's been no change in the female population. There's been no change in female biology. Things are still working the same way they always worked. Why would there all of a sudden be increased purchases of feminine hygiene products? So they went down and you know how people had adapted these products? The farm workers were using them as sweatbands on their foreheads to soak up, to absorb the sweat. And then they realized, okay, the stuff we put in these products is very absorbent. Maybe we ought to make sweatbands too. So when your customers are adapting your product for new uses, you can take that and build innovation. You look to universities, and one of our dreams for India is that we'll have more research universities. We'll be bringing in research budgets. I mean, one of the schools I'm affiliated with, Arizona State University, they get $2 billion a year in funding from the government and industry just to do research. So we need to start using those institutions here in India to develop new technologies and intellectual property. You can join a community of interest. Like in software, what about Linux? What about open source? You can use that for innovation. And you can even go out to the general public with innovation challenges. And that's what Procter & Gamble did so well. Okay? Now, I didn't show you the slide about the big barrier. But if your company has the attitude, we already know what's required, you will never have innovation. You'll just have what you've already had. And you may be like General Motors. For years, 25 years running, the biggest corporation in the world. 25 years after that, bankrupt. Because they thought they knew. All right, thank you, Dr. Goyal, for mentioning Jugaad. Jugaad is famous all over the world. India is known worldwide for Jugaad. But Dr. Michalkar and I have this discussion. He hates Jugaad. Okay, he says we need formally managed innovation, as I've been talking to you about. Formally managed 5-step design thinking. And I say, Dr. Michalkar, you're right. I'm here to teach people formal innovation, systematized innovation. But I'll take the Jugaad too. We get a lot of great stuff from Jugaad as well. Okay. Anyway, so as long as you think you already know it, there's no room for innovation. If all you want to do is make a better television, a better... Ranga, sir? Okay, all right. If all you want to do is make a better motorcycle, make a better biscuit, it's not usually going to be a breakthrough. Adding new features, no. Procter & Gamble realized that they weren't going to get all the ideas from in-house. So they set this achievement, and they achieved it. They wanted to see all the great ideas, so they encouraged people, and they were extremely flexible how they brought in other people and their ideas. And it worked. They reached that benchmark. They reached that target. So that not only the great people at P&G were giving them innovations, but the rest of the world was giving them too. Okay? So this is what I say. Use the best practices. Use the best practices. Learn design thinking. Train on it. Train the people on it. Get them using it and applying it. That's how you make innovation more successful. You can innovate in marketing. Okay? Ginger, great innovation. Became an award-winning chain for Tatas because it wasn't there. They had a new kind of budget hotel that nobody ever figured out before. Okay, I won't go into the others. I'll just mention Listerine. They had been doing mouthwash. I think some of you call it mouth bath. And that would clean up all the bacteria and make your breath smell better. So then they realized not everybody wanted to gargle or rinse the mouth. So they put a little bit of their stuff on a dissolvable tape, and you just let it melt on your tongue, and your breath would feel fresh. So that was definitely marketing a better product. Okay. Another Dr. Jagdish Sheth's 4 A's. You may be familiar with them. Okay. Southwest made flying cheap. So cheap, you could take away bus customers and put them on a plane. America Online, many years ago, because I'm ancient, like many of you are. We're all in the older generation. But when AOL first started marketing, instead of you having to go and buy it or anything like that, they put their 3.5-inch floppy disk. Can you imagine? 3.5-inch floppy disk with AOL software all over the place. Office supply stores, supermarkets, anywhere you go. You could just pick one up free of charge. They made it available everywhere. And they won the contest. They beat CompuServe. And from at the very beginning of the internet in US, within a couple of years, AOL was 30 million users, 3 crores. Okay, so you got that. So I think we're hitting 7 o'clock. The last thing I'm going to share with you then is, in some corporations, it actually makes sense to have a dedicated innovation lab. We said, what structure works? Okay, do we want to have innovation in our company at these departments? Do we want to have innovation sitting outside of our company? Do we want to have it in the NPD group? Do we want to have it in the marketing group? And do we want to have a special innovation lab? Okay, so this is what Pitney Bowes did, because their company, their CMD, the CEO and chairman, was such a big believer in innovation that he made it happen. You can read this very briefly. They put money and manpower into it, and they became one of the leading holders of patents of any corporation. They had over 3,500 active patents because they invested in it. So we've run to 7:01. I don't want to keep you late, but that's what I had to share with you. I hope you found it valuable. I enjoyed sharing it with you. I want to thank you for your response and your feedback. And now back to you, Chandan, however you want to continue. I'm here to answer questions if people wish.
Right. Thank you very much. I think excellent. This was really captivating for in that sense. We'll open it for Q&A, and I think we have 10 minutes for that. So probably Q&A, which is, if you have questions, I'll just refer to the chat box. I have 2 of them, but let me just go to the chat box first, so to see if there's something. Okay. So if anyone has any question, please let me know. We'll just unmute and ask those. Meanwhile, I'll put mine. You mentioned about part-time innovation. Now, again, traditionally, if you have to do the part-time innovation, probably the program or the structure has to be really ably supporting it. It won't happen. Otherwise, it's a wishful thing. It may just click once a lifetime, maybe. But even if we go for a part-time thing, the other structures that we have to put across, which makes it accountable. How do you typically, I mean, what are, let's say, the ROIs or KPIs for those more relevant?
Okay, well, that's 2 different questions, KPIs and ROIs, all right? So since Sunil Abrol asked about ROI, and since you've asked about ROI, I guess I better talk about it. Okay, the ROI, we made something called a spider chart at Pitney Bowes. And so it's like a bunch of ovals, or it's like almost like a drawing of an atom with a nucleus and electrons around it, something like that, or a mind map is probably a better. So everything in the center is connected by a series of connections to the outside on a spider chart. So in each of those outer limit and even moving toward the center, we put down the name of a project from our R&D department. We called it the Pitney Bowes Advanced Concepts and Technology. No, actually, Manoharji, it's ISME Mumbai. But thank you for asking. There is another ISME. We're the ISME School of Management and Entrepreneurship, not Management Excellence. Okay, so going back to Pitney Bowes, we've mapped out from the past 6 or 7 years all of the projects we've done. And then as we moved toward the present day, we drew a connector and say something we discovered in that inks project, because we had printers of our franking machines, or something we discovered in our steganography project, because we were looking at steganography, if you know what that is, or anything else. That's, by the way, that's hidden messages in pictures, hiding messages in code in pictures, steganography. All right. So, and this other one we did with networks, and this other one we did with high speed envelope processing. Blah blah blah. It contributed into this project, and then that contributed into this project. So as you got toward the middle, you could see where what you learned in one R&D project would feed into the next, and so on. And so by doing that, we were able to see that even if the initial project didn't give us a new product, many times something from that would end up in a future generation in a profit-making product. So that's one way we were able to justify. Of course, we happened to be there during the time when we had the second largest patent infringement judgment in the history of the United States. The second
Apple?
biggest. No, Apple. I don't know. Apple might have been the first. Maybe something has happened more since then. But it turned out in one of our innovation projects in the mid 80s, one of our innovators had come up with a patent. And we didn't realize it. It was on the shelf somewhere. But every desktop printer manufacturer had infringed our patent. So I like to sort of like role play the conversation. You know, Pitney Bowes picks up the phone, ring, 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 dials the number. On the other hand, in Dallas or in California, hello, this is Hewlett Packard. Hi, this is Pitney Bowes. What can I do for you, Pitney Bowes? Well, I'm sorry to inform you, you have infringed on our patent and we want money. What? Well, yeah, I think it was $450 million. And so we could give all the credit on that 450 just to our invention. We never had to build a product, design a product, sell a product, service a product. Just by doing that R&D and coming up with that patent, we earned $450 million. Not bad, huh? So what's the ROI? I mean, it's a crapshoot. You can never be sure. But the track record for doing innovation in a managed scientific way is actually very good. Use the best practices. If you don't, I don't hold up that much hope for you. It'll fail just like all those other suggestion schemes that give us patents that never make money. But if you manage it well, oh my God, Ranga sir is asking me about Clay Christensen, who unfortunately passed away last year. He's one of my gurus. He's one of my gurus. Disruptive innovation, the innovation. I teach that stuff. I love Clay Christensen, absolutely. And one of his models that I teach a lot is job to be done. That's one of his models. Okay, so I hope I answered your question. There's no hard and fast way to measure ROI. In terms of KPI, we used to measure number of patents. That was a key metric for us, performance indicator for our innovation lab. Remember, we had another 200 engineers, we had 45 experts in various fields just doing innovation. I was the business guy, right? But I'm an idea guy. But we had 200 engineers doing product development. They had different KPIs, but ours might be just, patents. Okay. Next question.
Sure, thank you. Anuj, you had something to add, I guess.
Yeah, what I was saying was, the first two slides which David had, he mentioned about the CEO setting the examples, right? And earlier when he started, he spoke about the long list of customers, David, you spoke. Most of these I noticed were driven by what we call family businesses. They were not professionally run firms, right? In which the culture that is actually promoted by the real owner is more overpowering than the culture promoted by the CEO. And the CEO is a Me Too guy. So how did you actually handle that?
Well, you take RIL as a great example of a family-run but professionally managed business. Okay, as I told you, up until 2007, Mukesh was a no innovation guy. He said, where we're going to do well is in project management. And they did fantastic. That was his culture. Reliance was known as the company that could get projects done cheaply and efficiently. You recall that, I'm sure. But under Dr. Mashelkar's
Reliance used to
influence,
innovatively do those projects. They were not just any
what's that?
project company. Their project
Huge ones,
was
yeah.
all about innovation in project management.
Yes, exactly. But that's what their culture was, which is exactly my point. But Mukesh changed his mind. His previous philosophy was, you bring us a new idea, we're going to reject it. That was his policy. We do not want to be the guinea pig. You go prove that it works somewhere else, we'll buy it. That was his policy. He changed that in 2007, 2008. And he says, we're going to change the culture. And he started with a big bang. And please don't tell him I said this. I won't tell you the details, so the story will remain a little bit hidden. But the Big Bang was a dud. It was an absolute dud. All right. I can't tell you anything more than that. And the reason it was a dud was because, as we said, the culture was not there to support it. And another thing, as Prahlad talked, systems, the structures were not there to support it. So that's when he brought in me and some other people. Our Sridhar, you may know our Sridhar, Ideas Are Us. We worked together with their innovation leadership team for about 10 months in 2008. And we helped them put in place the right programs and the right structure and the right methods. And they set up something at that time called Project Kurukshetra, which is still with us today and is a source of many, many big breakthroughs. So yeah, you're exactly right. The CEO or the owner or whoever it is has to be behind it. Now, the story I told you of Pitney Bowes and the $450 million, that was not a family-run business. That's a listed company with a board of directors and a professional CMD. So it's not that one or the other.
I'm not saying that family-run businesses are the only ones doing innovation. What I'm saying is, typically, let's take Wipro, for example, right? In
Yeah.
Wipro, the professional CEO is very separate from the owner, right? The owner
Yes.
is also the chairman. Similarly, in other Birla companies that you mentioned, the owner is Mr. Birla himself, and there is a professional CEO. But the professional CEO can never overshadow the guy who's the owner of the company. And that's
Right.
where, even when a person, and I've seen these lot of with my own customers, when the professional CEO tries to do innovation, the chairman or the owner does not seem or does not gel with that thought, right? And that's where that's a show.
I take your point.
Asking your example there, where what you
I
found.
take your point. I said the CEO, I might as well have said the head honcho, whether that's the CEO or the chairman. But yeah, the head honcho sets the tone for everybody. You're quite right, Anjus. Shukriya.
And I think we're almost on time. So I would request Shrikant, if you can wrap up the session for us and a vote of thanks to this amazing talk we have had this evening.
Sure. Hi, David. I'm Shrikant Pangarkar. Chandan has given me a pleasant duty to wrap up and propose a vote of thanks. I must say very frankly that the topic which you chose is closest to my heart. And I believe that innovation is not restricted to only companies, organizations, or businesses. It is actually all encompassing. In your day-to-day life also, you can do innovation in the way you do things. And they could either save time, save money, or be more efficient. So that culture has to be definitely fostered. And you have given us very good ideas that it should be started by the CEO, promoted by the CEO, and the CEO should make all efforts to create a culture where more and more people contribute to innovative ideas. There are some spin-off benefits of innovating. The person who gives an idea, if it is accepted, he gets totally motivated. And when he gets motivated, the others also get motivated. Actually, organizations flourish only on the motivation of people who work for that. So I was very happy to note down whatever you told us. And believe me, it gave me an innovative idea that I must connect with you more than only 1 hour of today's talk. Thank you so much, David, for such a lovely talk. And I must also thank the participants for being active participants. And I think we can go on and on to briefly tell about what you told us. But I would say that since everyone was attentive, I won't repeat those things and just wrap up with a big thank you to David and the participants. Good night to you all.
Thank you very much. One quick request, if you can have your videos on, I'll take a quick picture. 5 seconds, if you can all switch on your videos, maybe.
I have done mine.
Yeah, 1 second, I'll just click.
सबको धन्यवाद एक आनंद था आपके बीच में होना
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
David. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Chandan.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye, Jay.
Bye, bye, bye.